On March 11, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake, the world's fifth largest earthquake since 1900, ruptured 80 miles off the coast of Sendai, Japan. The tremors of the quake were the result of a violent uplift of the seafloor where the Pacific tectonic plate slides beneath the plate Japan sits on. Tens of miles of crust ruptured along the trench where the tectonic plates meet. Because the quake occurred at the shallow depth of 15 miles, much of its energy was released at the sea floor. The eruption of the quake resulted in the formation of a tsunami. At its peak, the tsunami rushed nearly 23-foot waves along northeast Japan and 13-foot waves along the coast. Some waves traveled up to 6 miles inland. The top speed of the tsunami over the open ocean reached nearly 500 miles an hour, about the normal cruising speed of a jetliner. There were 4 confirmed foreshocks and 400 confirmed aftershocks. The duration of shaking reported in Japan was anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, and the greatest distance the quake was felt was nearly 1,250 miles away from the epicenter. As of April 18th, the death toll from this historic quake tsunami rose to nearly 14,000, while another 14,000 remain missing. Japanese police and troops continue combing the ruins in search of more bodies. Another 137,000 have been displaced by the disasters. As of April 11th, 92.5% of the victims died by drowning. Victims aged 60 or older accounted for 65.2% of the deaths, with 24% of total victims being in their 70s. Over 125,000 buildings were destroyed, along with heavy damage to roads and railways, creating fires in many areas, along with a dam collapse. The disaster created an estimated 25 million tons of rubble and debris. Around 4.4 million households were left without electricity and 1.5 million without water. Several nuclear power plants were damaged, causing monumental effects, along with 15 ports were damaged, along with several oil refineries being set to fire, and many sections of the Tohoku Expressway were damaged. Telecommunications also suffered major disruptions due to the disaster. The end result of this tragedy also resulted in the Earth's axis being shifted and the length of day being shorter, and an increase in the Earth's rotation. The aftermath of the earthquake tsunami included both a humanitarian crisis and a major economic impact.
Immediately after the tragic events that happened in Japan, the military jumped in to help in any way that they could. They immediately began a rescue, relief, and recovery movement that would soon be known as Operation Tamagotchi. Tamagotchi means friendship in Japanese. It's best summed up in an article found at defense.gov where President Obama stated, "The friendship and alliance between our two nations is unshakable, and only strengthens our resolve to stand with the people of Japan as they overcome this tragedy." To overcome the tragedy, however, meant that the Japanese people needed the basic necessities in order to survive. U.S. military ships and aircraft came from all over to bring supplies to Japan. Some of the ships included the USS Ronald Reagan, USS Tortuga, USS McCampbell, USS Curtis Wilbur, USS Preble, USS Chancellorsville, and many others. According to a report written on March 25th found on Marines.mil by Gunnery Sergeant Cindy Fisher, more than 129,000 pounds of water and 4,200 pounds of food had been distributed. Along with that, there were 42,000 pounds of heating fuel. In another article found on thewallstreetjournal.com, on March 15th, the USS Ronald Reagan alone brought 17 tons of supplies, including food, blankets, and pillows. Another source from CNN.com states that on March 23rd, at least 25 flights carried in 468 tons of food, water, fuel, and other emergency supplies, and another 11 flights delivered 109 tons of humanitarian aid cargo. Along with the supplies and cargo provided to aid in the recovery, the ships and aircraft also brought manpower to work side by side with the other relief aids and Japanese people to begin to tackle the long, grueling cleanup. An article found at CNN.com, written by Larry Shaughnessy, said that at one time there were more than 20,000 military personnel involved with Operation Tamagotchi. Although there are long-term issues involved with the destruction of the earthquake and tsunami, with the help of the military, other humanitarian relief programs, and people from around the world, the tragedy that struck Japan can and will be overcome.
After the earthquake and tsunami in Japan, the immediate search and recovery began. Many organizations came to the aid of Japan, delivering supplies, food, and care. Save the Children was one of those organizations. As the world's leading independent organization for children, they believe they inspire hope for the future. When the earthquake hit Japan, the Save the Children organization was there with food, medical care, and education. They not only brought supplies, but provided the child-friendly spaces with opportunity to play with other children. This gave parents an opportunity to cope and work on recovery. Children were obviously not the only victim in the earthquake. The elderly also took a big hit. Because the elderly population in Japan is so huge, especially in remote areas, another organization jumped in with their efforts, Doctors Without Borders. Doctors Without Borders is an international medical humanitarian organization created by doctors and journalists in the 1970s. They provided aid in many countries whose survival is threatened by violence, neglect, or catastrophe. In Japan's case, many survivors in the elderly community had lost medication and prescription, and due to overcrowded conditions in evacuation centers, many would develop infections such as upper respiratory tract. Doctors Without Borders not only saw consults on injured patients, but also mental health support. When some of the first doctors arrived, only one of them was a psych doctor. After talking with many people, they saw a major need that was way beyond their staff capacity, needed for more mental health support. Many other organizations are helpful in the relief effort, such as Global Giving, Japan Society, Project Hope, Direct Relief International, and the American Red Cross. The relief efforts of so many
The March 11th earthquake and tsunami in Japan caused an explosion at a nuclear power facility about 160 miles north of Tokyo. That took place on March 12th. The earthquake is what caused the power plant to explode. The roof and the doors were blown off. Government officials advised people to stay indoors if they were within 12 miles. And they told them that it would help if they would breathe through wet cloth. Effects of radiation would be cancer if you're exposed to it a lot. An example of that would be the same as getting a lot of x-rays. The short-term effects or causes after radiation would be nausea, vomiting, red itchy skin, fever, headaches, weight loss, even hair loss, low blood pressure, and a lot of other things. How to stop the radiation, they said that it could take months. At one spot there was a crack in a pit, and it showed that there was about 1,000 millisievers of radiation per hour that was being let out into the air. To try and prevent it, they poured concrete into the crack, but it did not help. They used polymers to act like a diaper, which would take out all the radiation from the air and the water, but it showed no effect and it hasn't helped so far. And that is the radiation effects that are happening in Japan right now.
Hi, I'm Craig Swensen. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychological consequences the people of Japan may face in the wake of the disastrous tsunami. Natural disasters such as the tsunami that took place in Japan can have devastating impact on the psychological and social well-being of anyone who has been exposed. A disaster such as this threatens personal safety, overwhelms defense mechanisms, and disrupts community and family structures. An event like this, which causes mass casualties and destruction of property, most of the time leads to a collapse of social networks and daily routines. Children and adolescents are more vulnerable than adults to these traumatic events and are prone to develop psychological conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. People with PTSD re-experience the event again and again in at least one of several different ways. They may have frightening dreams or memories of the event, feel as if they are going through the event all over again, somewhat like a flashback, or become upset during the anniversary of the disastrous event. Psychological effects of a disaster such as the tsunami in Japan is nothing to take lightly. Oftentimes, for the victims, the psychological aftermath of the event can be just as bad or even worse than the event that they had gone through in the first place. Thank you very much.